It wasn't just a jet, it was a symbol, a gift, a trust, and they shattered it mid-flight. Let me ask you something. If your closest friends, people you once called family, borrowed your most prized possession, left it nearly broken, and walked away without so much as an apology, what would you do? Now imagine that possession wasn't just a car or a house. It was a private luxury jet, owned by none other than Sir Elton John. And the people who borrowed it? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. You'd expect respect, right? You'd expect accountability. Instead, Elton got silence, smoke, and betrayal. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But this story is more than just a scandal over jet engines and a vanishing luxury car. It's about the final collapse of one of the most unexpected and glamorous friendships of the 21st century. A friendship born in grief, cemented by loyalty, and destroyed by entitlement. Because behind the glittering headlines, behind the Instagram photos and public defenses, there's another story. A quiet storm that had been brewing for months. One that ended with a furious phone call, a missing vehicle, and a private letter that cut Meghan and Harry off for good. And here's the kicker. This didn't come from the tabloids. This came from people inside Elton's inner circle. People who watched the unraveling from front row seats. People who were stunned by how quickly and how coldly things turned. You want to know the truth? So did we. And once we started digging, what we found was almost unbelievable. A jet overloaded beyond protocol. A luxury car that disappeared from a locked hangar. An unauthorized passenger no one expected. And a digital breadcrumb trail that led straight to betrayal. And yet, none of it leaked to the press until now. So why now? Why is this story just emerging months after the event? Because Elton's patience has run out. And so have the NDAs. Let's rewind. For years, Elton John had been one of Meghan and Harry's fiercest defenders. Publicly, loudly, consistently. When the press went after them for hypocrisy, flying on private jets while preaching about climate change, Elton stood in front of that fire and took the heat himself. Remember that tweet? "I paid for the carbon offset," he wrote. "I'm supporting them like I supported Diana." That wasn't just a defense. That was Elton staking his reputation on them. And you know what? He meant it. Because for Elton, this wasn't just about fame or image. It was about loyalty. To Diana. To her legacy. To her sons. He adored Diana. Still does. And in Harry, he saw a continuation of her spark. Her rebellion. Her vulnerability. So when Harry fell in love with Meghan, and the media turned against her, Elton did what no one else in his circle dared to do. He opened his world. His home. His parties. His network. And, eventually, his jet. And that's where everything started to unravel. Because the moment Meghan and Harry boarded that private plane, something shifted. What began as a friendship built on mutual respect slowly evolved into something else. A silent tension, unspoken expectations, and a growing sense, at least among Elton's team, that the Sussexes were no longer guests. They were users. You could say it started small. Requests for last-minute flights, unusual luggage loads, odd security demands, but nothing major. Nothing that couldn't be smoothed over with a smile or a thank you card. Until the flight. You know the one I'm talking about. The one no one was supposed to mention. It wasn't on the books. It wasn't planned far in advance. It was whispered about in hangars and at staff meetings, like something sacred had been violated. Because on that day, they didn't just use the jet. They left it nearly unusable. And worse, when the crew returned to inspect the plane, what they found made jaws drop. Overheated engine readings, strange fuel usage data, and something far stranger, a missing Bentley that had been parked near the jet hangar, completely gone. Gone. As in, vanished. And here's where things get really uncomfortable. Because when Elton's team raised the alarm, they didn't get apologies. They didn't get accountability. They got silence. And then, they got spin. Private communications from Meghan's camp hinted at blame, faulty hangar protocols, negligent jet crew, deflections, denials, diversions. But the data didn't lie. Neither did the pilot logs. And neither did the surveillance footage, at least what hadn't mysteriously gone missing. And through it all, Elton waited. Waited for Harry to call. Waited for Meghan to respond. Waited for any form of acknowledgement that his trust had been violated. It never came. Until finally, he made the call himself. That conversation? According to one insider, it was like watching a godfather disown his heir. Elton wasn't yelling. He didn't need to. His disappointment was sharper than rage. He laid it all out. How the crew had risked their jobs to accommodate them. How a decades-old trust had been shattered in a single night. How Diana would never have allowed this. And Harry? He was reportedly stunned. He said he thought they were still good. But Elton didn't respond the way he once would have. He hung up. Then, a few days later, came the letter. Delivered via courier. Formal. Cold. Final. No more jet access. No more invites. No more anything. Elton John had officially cut ties with Meghan and Harry. And yet, that's not the craziest part. Because while the jet damage was infuriating, while the missing car was bizarre, while the public silence was deafening, it's what came after that truly sent shockwaves through Elton's circle. A leaked Instagram photo, metadata inconsistencies, a mysterious additional passenger, and a financial transaction that opened up an entirely new can of worms. Because as it turns out, that flight, that friendly favor from Elton, may have been something else entirely. Something transactional, something political, something deceptive. But before we get to that, before we dive into the receipts, the betrayal, the ghosted godfather, and the unanswered final message, you need to understand just how deep this friendship once ran. Because what came next didn't just end a jet-sharing arrangement. It shattered a legacy built on grief, trust, and memory. And no one saw it coming. Could you forgive someone for betraying the memory of your closest friend? That's what Elton John was forced to ask himself. And he didn't like the answer. Because this wasn't just about a jet. Not really. Not deep down. This was about Diana. You see, when Diana died, Elton didn't just lose a friend. He lost a sister. A soul tethered to his own through pain, pressure, and fame neither of them asked for. He sang Candle in the Wind, not just for the cameras, but from a place of raw, volcanic heartbreak. And in the years that followed, he promised himself one thing. He'd protect her boys. He kept that promise. Even when William drifted into royal duties and Harry drifted, well, elsewhere, Elton stayed true. He hosted them, guided them, advised them, especially Harry. So when Harry married Meghan, and the media came for her with claws out, Elton stepped in, loudly, publicly, defiantly. He lent his voice, his platform, his name, and, eventually, his jet. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. At first, it was framed as kindness, support, shielding the Sussexes from paparazzi lenses, from prying eyes. But over time, something shifted. Elton's team began noticing patterns. Last-minute requests, changed destinations, excess baggage, security staff that gave them side eyes and encrypted orders. One insider described it as borrowing a friend's car, then using it for an underground poker run. It just didn't feel right. Still, Elton said nothing. He chalked it up to royal life, to the chaos of being hunted by tabloids, to Harry's trauma, Meghan's adjustment, until that one trip. The one that nobody wants to talk about, but everybody in Elton's circle remembers. The jet left from Nice. It was supposed to be a straightforward hop, discreet, quiet. Only a handful of staff were notified. But from the moment the engines started, something was off. The crew noticed extra weight on board. The numbers didn't align. Someone had added something last minute, without logging it. Worse, the fuel consumption during flight didn't match the distance. When the plane landed, maintenance staff were waiting. Engine temperatures had spiked midair. Sensors showed anomalies, like the engine had been pushed beyond protocol tolerances. The flight log read normal, but the aircraft's computer told a very different story. And then there was the car, a rare Bentley Azure, parked inside a secured hangar adjacent to the jet. Gone. No paperwork, no exit log, no CCTV footage, except for one corrupted timestamp. It vanished, just like that. Now here's where things get icy. Because when Elton's team approached Meghan's assistants about the flight, the damage, the car, they didn't get concern. They got condescension. One source claimed the response was, "We assumed the vehicle was part of the courtesy arrangement." Courtesy? A $500,000 vehicle? Even worse, when pressed for accountability, the Sussex camp allegedly began spinning. Hints of crew mismanagement, flawed security procedures, even a suggestion that someone on Elton's end may have tipped off the press. It was the kind of deflection that turns cracks into canyons. But Elton still didn't go public. He called Harry. A personal, final attempt at resolution. Witnesses say it was polite at first. Then it became personal. Elton didn't yell. He simply asked, "Would your mother be proud of how this has played out?" There was silence. Harry didn't have an answer. And Elton didn't wait for one. The letter followed 3 days later, delivered in a manila envelope, written with surgical precision. No more flights. No more press coordination. No more contact. Meghan's team reached out. Elton didn't respond. Then came the silence. Until the photo surfaced. A seemingly harmless post. An interior shot of the jet's cabin. Plush seats. Champagne flutes. Framed in just the right filter. Captioned, "Thanks for the lift, old friend." But here's the catch. It wasn't posted by Meghan. Or Harry. It came from a fashion stylist. One loosely linked to Meghan's inner circle. The problem? That stylist had never been publicly seen with Harry or Meghan. And worse, metadata from the photo showed the image was taken mid-flight. Not during boarding. Not post-landing. Which means someone was on board who wasn't logged. Someone Elton never approved. Someone who had no business being on that aircraft. Speculation ran wild. A donor? A political figure? A media exec? No one knows for sure. But Elton's legal team certainly noticed. And then came the money. Because while Elton had covered the cost of previous flights, this one seemed different. There was a reimbursement filed, traced through a shell corporation linked to a wellness initiative supported by Meghan's foundation. But that initiative didn't even exist a year ago. And according to financial reports, had 0 staff, 0 events, and 1 suspicious transaction. Fuel money. You starting to see it? This wasn't just a jet incident. This was a play, a power move, a transaction disguised as a favor. And Elton? He doesn't do deception. Not in his world. Not with Diana's son. So, for the first time in over a decade, he cut off not just contact, but emotional connection. He told his closest friends, "I tried. I really tried. But I can't protect him anymore." And that's the real tragedy. Not the jet. Not the car. Not the Instagram post. But the slow death of a legacy built on trust and trauma. So the next time someone tells you this was about a plane, remind them. This was about betrayal. Of friendship. Of memory. Of Diana. And it's not over yet. Because what we uncovered next, hidden in plain sight, would leave even the most seasoned insiders stunned. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. How do you go from Godfather to Ghosted? From fierce defender to final denouncer? The answer begins not on a runway or in a luxury jet lounge, but in the shadows of a royal funeral. When Princess Diana died in 1997, the world stopped, and no one felt the earth crack beneath their feet more than Elton John. You remember the moment. Westminster Abbey. Elton, in a charcoal suit, trembling as he sang "Candle in the Wind." That wasn't performance. That was grief laid bare. Raw. Ragged. Real. He hadn't just lost a friend. He'd lost family. Diana had been his confidant. His co-conspirator in challenging royal rigidity. They were cut from similar cloth, flamboyant, compassionate, misunderstood. After her death, Elton carried her memory like a torch and a wound. And out of that grief, he made a promise. He would look after her boys. He kept that promise. Quietly. Steadily. Through William's rise and Harry's rebellion, Elton stood close enough to offer support, but far enough to give them space. Especially with Harry. Harry was different. Troubled. Wild. Vulnerable. The one who carried Diana's fire and her fragility. Elton saw that, and he didn't flinch. Over the years, their bond strengthened. Private lunches. Encouragement behind the scenes. Little gestures that meant everything. And then came Meghan. When Harry introduced her, Elton was reportedly thrilled. Finally, someone outside the institution. Someone bold, like Diana. Someone to rewrite the script. Elton hosted them early on. A quiet visit to his French estate in Nice. No photographers. Just warmth, music, and conversation. It was there, insiders say, that the three laughed over old stories of Diana. That Elton offered the first of many favors. A short private flight back to the UK in his jet. It was subtle at first. A show of support. But it wouldn't stay subtle for long. As the tabloid pressure mounted, first on Harry, then on Meghan, Elton's role evolved. From quiet supporter to public shield. He clapped back at critics. Wrote open letters. blasted headlines he deemed relentless and racist. Remember that? When the press called Harry and Meghan hypocrites for flying private to an environmental summit, Elton didn't just defend them. He dropped receipts. He tweeted, "To support Prince Harry's commitment to the environment, we ensured their flight was carbon neutral. I am deeply distressed by today's distorted and malicious account in the press surrounding the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's private stay at my home." That wasn't a casual defense. That was a declaration of allegiance. In a world where the royal family stayed cold and quiet, Elton wrapped himself around them like armor. And they leaned in. More flights, more invites, more whispers of Elton joining their future charitable projects. There was even talk, though never confirmed, that Elton might perform at Archie's christening. But something changed after the move to America. Insiders say the tone of their communication shifted. Less gratitude. More demands. Less intimacy. More scheduling. More, "have the jet ready by noon." And less, "how's David doing?" At first, Elton shrugged it off. They were building a life. Being hunted by the press. Navigating an entirely new world. But others in his circle noticed. His partner, David Furnish, allegedly warned him, "They're starting to see you as an asset, not a friend." Still, Elton held out hope. He believed in Harry. Believed he was trying to do good. Believed Meghan was a breath of fresh air. And let's be honest, he loved the symbolism. Diana's son, rising from the wreckage, finding happiness on his own terms. It was poetic. But real life isn't a song lyric. And cracks began to show. One crew member on Elton's jet recounted a moment during a flight to Vancouver. Meghan reportedly snapped at a staff member for offering the wrong brand of mineral water. It was minor, but telling. Then came the wardrobe request. An assistant from Meghan's team allegedly asked Elton's staff if they could provide a last-minute, high-end garment bag during a stopover. They declined. The response? Silence. No thank you. No follow-up. Just cold air. More instances followed. Flight requests changed hours before takeoff. Personal security made unlogged substitutions. Elton's longtime jet staff were pressured into extending work hours, without compensation or acknowledgement. Still, Elton said nothing, because that's who he was. Loyal, discreet, protective, especially of Harry. But behind closed doors, he began to worry. Is this who he's becoming? He reportedly asked a friend. And that fear only deepened after the Oprah interview. Not because Elton didn't believe their pain. He did. He knew the press could be brutal. He'd lived it. But because of how it was done, so public, so absolute, so scorched earth, it wasn't that Elton expected them to stay quiet. He just hoped they'd stay graceful. Yet the friendship survived. For a while. Because through it all, Elton still believed in the boy he'd once comforted. Still saw the shadows of Diana behind Harry's eyes. Until the jet incident. That night, Elton's trust collided with their entitlement. And the explosion shook more than just metal and engines. It rattled the very foundation of their bond. A jet borrowed without proper briefing. An engine pushed too far. A car gone missing. A lack of communication. And worst of all, no apology. Harry didn't call until Elton reached out first. And Meghan? Sources say she never responded at all. That's when the Godfather realized something devastating. This wasn't Diana's son anymore. Not the boy he remembered. Not the young man he defended. This was a different Harry. A version shaped by years of conflict, isolation, and, yes, perhaps by love. But it was a version Elton no longer recognized. And certainly no longer trusted. So he made the decision. Quietly. Firmly. He cut them off. It wasn't petty. It was painful. It was necessary. Because to Elton, loyalty isn't about blind devotion. It's about respect, mutual care, gratitude. He gave all of that. And when it mattered most, he got none of it back. Still think this is just a spat over a plane? Then listen closely, because the next chapter reveals what really happened in that hangar. The heat, the overload, the logs that didn't match, the warning lights no one should have ignored. And the moment Elton knew. This wasn't just a borrowed jet. It was a burned bridge. What happens when a gift becomes a weapon? When something meant to protect becomes the catalyst for betrayal. That's exactly what happened the day Prince Harry and Meghan Markle boarded Elton John's private jet, for what would be the last time. This wasn't just any aircraft. It was Elton's prized Bombardier Global Express. A $70 million airborne palace that soared through clouds like a whisper fitted with handcrafted interiors, luxury finishes, and enough tech to make Silicon Valley executives jealous. To Elton, this jet wasn't just transportation. It was privacy. It was legacy. It was the same aircraft he used to flee paparazzi, to take David Furnish and their boys on discreet family holidays, to host music legends and political icons under the radar. Every inch of that plane had been touched by his trust. And when he offered it to Harry and Meghan, he was opening a vault. But let's rewind just a bit. Because before the scandal, before the accusations, and the missing car, there was a history of generosity. The first time Harry and Meghan used the jet was shortly after Archie was born. They were being stalked, hounded, chased by photographers with lenses the size of small cannons. The tabloids were relentless. Public sympathy was running low. So Elton stepped in. He offered his French villa in Nice, private, serene, and arranged for his jet to fly them in and out safely. The press went wild. Accusations of hypocrisy flooded social media. How could environmental campaigners fly private? Once again, Elton defended them publicly. He took the hit. I feel a profound obligation to protect Harry and his family from the unnecessary press intrusion, he tweeted. To maintain a high level of much-needed protection, we provided them with a private jet flight. He even revealed he paid for the carbon offset. That's how far he went to shield them. But things started to sour after that. There were more requests. A trip to Vancouver, then California, then back to Europe. Each time, the tone became more expected. Not would you mind, but have the jet ready. Not can we, but we need. Still, Elton said yes, because that's who he was. Until the flight that broke it all. Let's call it Flight X. No confirmed date. No confirmed destination. But confirmed consequences. It started with a message. Meghan's assistant requesting use of the jet for an urgent trip. The specifics were vague. The purpose unclear. But the request came with a soft push. This is important to the Duchess. Elton hesitated. It was short notice. His team was prepping the aircraft for his own travel the following day. Still, he agreed. Reluctantly. And just like that, the jet was cleared. Flight X took off from an airstrip near the Sussex's residence. On paper, it was routine. In reality, it was a disaster waiting to happen. From the beginning, crew members noticed red flags. First, cargo weight. Elton's jet could handle a considerable load, but that night the cargo bay was packed unusually tight. Multiple trunks, tech cases, even an unmarked wooden crate that raised eyebrows. One ground crew member reportedly asked, "Are they moving house or flying to war?" Second, passenger count. Flight manifest listed 4 individuals. Harry, Meghan, 2 security staff. But at the last second, a 5th person boarded. Not logged. Not introduced. She wore dark glasses. Never spoke. Sat in the rear lounge. Pilots asked for clarification. Meghan's assistant reportedly waved it off. She's just helping with wardrobe. No one argued. But everyone noticed. Third, fuel irregularities. The jet was fueled for a standard 4-hour journey. But midair, indicators suggested the engines were burning hotter than usual. The left side engine in particular showed signs of strain, slight, but measurable. A warning appeared on the cockpit display. Temp over tolerance. Monitor. Not an emergency, but not nothing. And then, the cabin incident. Somewhere over the Atlantic, crew reported that Meghan's team requested all lights be turned off, even during turbulence. Against protocol, they refused safety checks. One even blocked a stewardess from entering the rear cabin with refreshments. Why? To this day, no one knows. But when the jet landed, the silence was louder than the engines. Elton's maintenance team took over. What they found made their stomachs drop. The engine was scorched. Scorched. Internal temperature data showed Flight X had pushed the twin Rolls-Royce turbofans nearly to their red line. Not once, but 3 times. That didn't happen on its own. This wasn't weather-related. This wasn't pilot error. This was abuse of the aircraft's limits. And the pilots? They were fuming. We warned them, one later told an insider. They ignored us. But it gets worse. When the plane was pulled into its private hangar for cooling and inspection, the Bentley was still there. Elton's prized Bentley Azure convertible. Deep ocean blue. One of a kind. Parked. Secured. Logged. At 2:13 a.m., security cameras outside the hangar caught a flicker of movement. Then static. For 17 minutes, the feed cut out. When it returned, the Bentley was gone. No tow, no license plates. Just tire tracks leading out of the hangar, and silence. Security scrambled. They reviewed entry logs. No staff had clearance during that window. No alarms were tripped. The only vehicle recorded leaving was the black SUV that picked up Meghan and Harry's team. No one claimed responsibility. No one returned the car. To this day, it remains missing. Elton's team launched an internal investigation. Meghan's office was contacted. According to one staffer, the response was, "We have no knowledge of any missing vehicle." End of discussion. And the jet? Grounded for 2 weeks. Engine recalibrations. Component replacements. Tens of thousands in damage. No apology. No reimbursement. Just silence. Until Elton finally picked up the phone and made the call that would end everything. But we'll get to that. Because there's something you need to understand first. Flight X wasn't just an accident. It was a turning point. The moment Elton realized his generosity had become expectation. His jet, taken for granted. His trust, exploited. His legacy, dragged into someone else's mess. And as he looked at the scorched engines, the empty hangar, the vanished Bentley, he knew. This wasn't just mismanagement. It was a breach. Of friendship. Of loyalty. Of protocol. And what followed would ignite a firestorm. Because when Elton John cuts someone off, he does it with silence and steel. But what he didn't expect was what happened next. An emotional phone call, a deflection from Meghan's camp, and the beginning of a very public unraveling that no one was ready for. Not even Harry. What happens when the flight you thought would save you becomes the very thing that exposes you? That's exactly what Flight X became. A ticking time bomb cloaked in luxury leather seats and tinted windows. And the detonation? It didn't happen midair. It happened before the wheels even left the ground. Let's go back to that foggy morning at the airstrip just outside Santa Barbara. The location is remote, private, handpicked for discretion. No paparazzi, no press, just Elton's trusted jet, parked under heavy guard, waiting to carry Meghan and Harry, along with their team, on what was described as a quick escape. But from the very beginning, nothing about this flight was quick or routine. The red flags started rolling in one by one. The crew that morning arrived early. Captain R., Elton's longtime pilot, said he felt something was off before the sun even rose. There was this tension, he later told a colleague. It felt like we weren't just flying passengers. We were flying secrets. The baggage came first. The standard protocol? Passengers are limited to a certain weight of cargo for safety and fuel calculations. That's Aviation 101. But that morning, Meghan's assistant pulled up in a private SUV with a convoy of luggage. Not just suitcases, trunks, pelican cases, designer garment bags, and, yes, a long, polished crate sealed with metal fasteners. No one could explain what was inside. When crew asked about the weight, the assistant reportedly said, "It's already been approved by security." But no one in Elton's operations team had signed off. Then came the security team. Usually, high-profile guests bring 2, maybe 3 detailers. But on Flight X, there were 6, and only 2 were listed on the manifest. For extra bodies. No notice. No explanation. The co-pilot did a double take. "That changes fuel ratios," he murmured. "That changes the entire center of gravity." But no one raised a formal objection. Why? Because they knew the answer they'd get. It's for the Duke and Duchess. Still, the co-pilot radioed Elton's base anyway. He was worried. But the green light came through. Then came the moment that tipped everything. As passengers boarded, Captain R noticed a woman in sunglasses quietly stepping up the jet stairs. She wasn't listed. She wasn't familiar. And when he asked who she was, Meghan's assistant simply said, "Support staff." No name. No ID. Just like that, she vanished into the cabin. The flight manifest now had 3 discrepancies. Overloaded cargo, extra security, an unnamed passenger. Any one of those could have delayed takeoff. All 3 should have grounded the jet. But the orders came down fast. Take off now. That's when the overload became a danger. As the jet began taxiing, the crew noticed something strange. The left engine was making a low hum, too low for comfort. Captain R ran diagnostics. Engine temperature was already rising before they even hit the runway. He tried adjusting the throttle pressure, easing the strain. But as the jet hit full thrust to lift off, the left side engine pushed past its recommended torque threshold. A warning lit up in red. Overtolerance, engine Captain had a choice. Abort the flight, or pray the jet would level off and cool midair. He looked back at the sealed cabin door, then at his co-pilot. "We're committed," he muttered. They took off. The jet roared into the sky, loaded with people it wasn't prepared for, carrying cargo no one had inspected, and running hotter than it ever had on Elton John's watch. In the air, the real chaos began. At 31,000 feet, turbulence struck. Minor. Nothing severe. Standard protocol? Check seatbelts. Ensure passengers are safe. But when the flight attendant entered the rear lounge to conduct the safety walkthrough, she was stopped by a man in a dark suit, one of Meghan's detailers. "We're not to be disturbed," he said. The crew member was stunned. "But I need to." He raised a hand. "They're in rest. No access until landing." So, what was happening behind that closed door? No one knows. But a soft blue light glowed under the frame, and the faint sound of voices, low, urgent, possibly arguing, bounced off the cabin walls. Captain tried to monitor the engine. Every few minutes, the red light flared again. Too hot, too strained. And yet, no one in the cabin seemed to care. Then, something strange happened. The internal comms system pinged. The message? Divert course slightly, avoid scheduled route. The request came from Meghan's assistant. Why? No one explained. They drifted west. Not far, but enough to raise eyebrows. Was it a privacy concern? A change of heart? Or was someone trying to avoid satellite tracking? Either way, the change caused a fuel recalculation. They'd make it, but barely. The moment they landed, the jet's systems went into automatic cool-down mode. But something was wrong. The left engine wasn't just hot. It was damaged. The heat shields had expanded unnaturally. The exhaust valves were scorched. One technician later described it as flying with the afterburners half on. They checked the flight logs. They didn't match the engine data. Someone had overwritten the real-time telemetry with cleaner numbers. Who? No one on Elton's team would dare. That left one option, a breach from inside. Someone on board had access to the aircraft systems, and someone had covered their tracks. Then came the fallout. As Meghan's SUV rolled away from the tarmac, the head technician radioed Elton's personal office. "Sir, we have a problem," he said. Within the hour, Elton was briefed. Engine compromised. Flight logs suspicious. Cabin protocols violated. Passenger manifest tampered with. And nobody was taking responsibility. The cherry on top? When Elton's office emailed Meghan's team for clarification, the response came from her assistant. "We appreciate the use of the aircraft. Everything seemed to go smoothly from our end." Smoothly? That jet was nearly grounded for good. But the final blow? A leak. Someone whispered about the incident to a private aviation blog. Just a blip. One post. But Meghan's PR team pounced, hard. Within 48 hours, 3 articles had appeared subtly shifting blame. Elton's jet suffered engine glitch, one read. Sources close to the Duchess say protocols were unclear, another claimed. The narrative was forming. They weren't at fault. They were the victims of bad planning, of unclear standards, of staff error. Elton's crew was livid. "They made us look incompetent," one said. "They almost cooked that engine. And we were the ones left holding the smoke." And Elton? He didn't speak. Not publicly. Not yet. He was hurt. But he wasn't done. Not by a long shot. Because when he made the call to Harry next, it wasn't to talk about the jet. It was to talk about loyalty. And what Harry said during that call would change everything. Because behind closed doors, he didn't defend Meghan. Not really. And what he admitted would send shockwaves all the way back to Buckingham Palace. A $500,000 Bentley doesn't just walk off on its own. So how did it vanish without a trace? That's the question Elton John's team has been asking ever since the morning after Flight X. And the more they investigated, the stranger things got. This wasn't a simple case of keys left in the ignition. This wasn't some valet mix-up or delivery mishap. This was a Bentley Azure, one of the rarest models Elton owns. Ocean blue exterior, vintage ivory leather interior, custom monogrammed seats. A machine made for the open road, and Elton's personal favorite. But now, gone. And the circumstances of its disappearance were, in a word, impossible. Let's rewind again. The Bentley had been parked in Elton's private hangar at his preferred airstrip, not some commercial lot, not a public access garage. This was a fortified space behind biometric scanners, coded gates, and around-the-clock security. The jet and the car were stored together, always. The Bentley was a backup. A luxury option should Elton want to drive from the runway directly to a private event without press interference. On the night of Flight X, the car had been seen. Multiple crew members confirmed it. "I walked past it during final checks," one said. "It was spotless. Locked. Parked under its usual canopy." The cameras confirmed it too. At 9:17 p.m., CCTV footage captured the vehicle under LED lights. No movement. No access attempts. By 10:42 p.m., the jet had taken off with Harry, Meghan, their security team, and that mysterious, unlogged female passenger on board. At 2:13 a.m., however, everything changed. Security logs showed a temporary outage. Nothing major. Just a 17-minute interruption in video surveillance, centered entirely on the rear hangar bay where the Bentley was stored. Coincidence? Elton's head of security didn't think so. "We've never had an outage in that sector. Not in 12 years, he reportedly told internal investigators. "That's not a glitch. That's sabotage." When footage resumed at 2:30 a.m., the Bentley was gone. No exit footage. No alarms. No tire screech. Just absence. Gone. Erased. The only thing left behind. A single tire mark, barely visible, curving toward the auxiliary runway, which, by the way, had been opened remotely from an internal control panel. But here's the kicker. Only 4 people had clearance to access that control system. Elton, his logistics manager, his pilot, and a staff member who, on that exact night, was off-duty and logged out. Which leaves one obvious conclusion. Someone had access they shouldn't have. Now, the first question most people asked was obvious. Why would Meghan and Harry steal a Bentley? The answer? They wouldn't. Not directly. Not physically. But what if someone in their orbit did? What if a member of their team, in an effort to secure a souvenir, a favor, or even a tool for trade, saw an opportunity and took it? There's a theory. One crew member claims to have overheard Meghan's assistant discussing a gift being picked up before sunrise. No details. No names. Just, it needs to be discreet. No press. No Elton. When this was brought to Meghan's office's attention, the reply was troubling. They denied knowledge. They claimed the flight had been tight, that no detours were made, that their security had remained in full compliance. But when pressed further, silence. Emails went unanswered. Calls went to voicemail. Then came a bizarre twist. A photo surfaced online nearly a week later. Not public. Not viral. It was buried in the private Instagram account of an LA-based luxury vehicle broker. The image showed a car, deep ocean blue, vintage silhouette, identical body type. The caption? "For the right buyer. This piece of music history could be yours." The post vanished within hours. But not before Elton's team screen grabbed it. Was it the Bentley? No VIN was visible. No plates. No interior shot. But to those who knew the vehicle, it was too close. Too detailed. Too exact. The broker denied everything. Claimed it was an old photo. Said the car belonged to a collector client. Refused to provide paperwork. Elton's team hit a wall. And with no police report filed, yet, the matter remained unofficial. Unspoken. Buried. Why? Because Elton didn't want the press frenzy. Because once this got out, it wouldn't just be about a car. It would be about theft, scandal, royal fallout, Meghan's image, Harry's judgment, and Elton's own legacy of trust. But behind the scenes, he was livid. Staffers said his rage was quiet but volcanic. He canceled 2 appearances. He withdrew from a previously scheduled charity gala in Los Angeles, an event Meghan had reportedly planned to attend. Coincidence? Doubtful. Meanwhile, whispers grew louder. An anonymous staffer from Elton's team told a London journalist. There was more going on in that hangar than people realize. The jet was only part of the story. The car? That was the final straw. But the strangest part? Even after the Bentley disappeared, even after the logs were tampered with, even after Meghan's team refused to provide clear answers, Elton didn't go public. Not yet. Instead, he reached out, one last time. He called Harry. Direct. Personal. And this time, he didn't mask the anger. He told him exactly what he thought. About the engine abuse. About the surveillance blackout. About the Bentley. About the silence. What did Harry say? Sources claim his voice cracked. He reportedly said, "Elton, I didn't know about the car." Then, after a long pause, "We've lost control of some of this." That line echoed like a warning. They'd lost control. Of their team. Of their narrative. Of their relationships. Elton didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He simply replied, "That car wasn't yours to lose." The line went quiet. And within hours, Elton's office sent the now infamous letter, revoking privileges, cutting ties, erasing access. One insider said it felt like the closing of a chapter that should never have been written. And Meghan? She never responded, never called, never clarified. She posted 2 days later, though, a smiling photo from her Montecito garden, clutching a copy of The Art of Grace. The caption? "Protect your peace." To Elton, that was an answer in itself. And the Bentley? Still missing, still unclaimed, still haunting the airstrip where a friendship burned into dust. But the story wasn't over. Because what Elton didn't know was that someone on board Flight X had taken something else. Something far more dangerous than a car. A photo. And when that photo surfaced, it would ignite a whole new firestorm of betrayal. What do you do when you're caught red-handed? But instead of owning up, you point fingers at the very people who helped you. If you're Meghan Markle's team, according to those inside Elton John's circle, you double down, and you blame the jet crew. Yes, after the jet was overloaded, the engines overheated, the flight manifest didn't match the passengers on board, and a $500,000 Bentley vanished into thin air. Meghan's staff reportedly decided the best course of action was to shift the blame. And not just shift it, but spin it. Because when the dust settled from Flight X and the questions started pouring in about the engines, the flight logs, the unauthorized passenger, and the car, there was no apology, no outreach. Instead, there was a carefully worded email. One crew member, who asked not to be named, shared what it said. "We appreciate the transport provided to the Duke and Duchess. Any irregularities regarding cargo or clearance appear to be due to miscommunication between Elton's team and hangar staff. Please ensure future arrangements are better coordinated." Wait, what? They blamed Elton's own team? Let's break this down. Meghan's team didn't just dodge accountability. They framed the chaos as an operations failure, as if the crew hadn't properly logged baggage, as if the flight team had somehow failed to do their jobs, as if the missing Bentley was just a paperwork mishap. But let's get real. This wasn't a forgotten suitcase or an accidental reroute. This was a chain of events involving surveillance blackouts, engine abuse, restricted access violations, and a potentially stolen luxury vehicle. And now they were pinning it on the crew? The same crew who had served them champagne mid-flight? The same crew who delayed their own vacation plans to accommodate the trip? The same crew who had, on Elton's orders, been instructed to treat the Duke and Duchess with the highest level of discretion and respect? It was a gut punch, and Elton's staff weren't having it. Within 48 hours, internal emails flew across his estate and aviation headquarters. One technician wrote, "We went above and beyond. We warned them about the wait. We flagged the extra passengers. We were told to proceed, and now they're throwing us under the bus." Another wrote, "I've worked for Sir Elton for 15 years. I've never seen anyone try to weaponize kindness like this." Even Elton's logistics manager, normally tight-lipped and professional, was reportedly stunned by the tone of the email. But that wasn't the end of it. Because as the rumors started leaking into industry circles, private pilots, hangar operators, aviation security firms, something even more brazen happened. Meghan's office issued what one insider called a preemptive PR whisper campaign. Here's how it works. A few friendly journalists are quietly briefed. Anonymous sources close to the Duchess offer their version of events. Outlets publish just enough to shift public perception without naming names. Within a week, the headlines began surfacing. Meghan and Harry face jet trouble. Crew reportedly unprofessional. Royal source says Sussex is caught off guard by chaotic flight handling. Engine glitch on lone jet sparks questions about protocols. You catch the pattern? The language is just vague enough to avoid lawsuits, but just specific enough to smear Elton's team. And behind the scenes, Elton was furious, not just because his crew was being slandered, not just because his prize jet had suffered six-figure damage, Not just because his Bentley was still missing, but because the very people he'd defended so vocally, so publicly, had gone behind his back and turned his kindness into a weapon. This was personal now, and it hurt. Because Elton knew what it took to survive the scrutiny of the press. He knew how Diana suffered under that glare. He empathized with Harry. But this was manipulation. This was strategic. And it was ugly. Still, he held back from going public. Why? Some say he was giving Harry one last chance to fix it. Others say he wanted to avoid fueling the media cycle. But those closest to him say the reason was simpler. He didn't want to believe it was real. He didn't want to believe Diana's son would allow this. And then came the breaking point. A leaked internal memo from Meghan's PR firm. Never meant to see the light of day, but leaked, nonetheless. One bullet point stood out. Should any flight-related narratives gain traction, steer towards safety mismanagement by aircraft operator. Avoid mention of engine diagnostics or missing car. Boom. There it was. In black and white. A deliberate strategy to shift blame. And the phrase, avoid mention of missing car, that sealed it. They knew. They knew about the Bentley. They knew what had gone wrong. And they chose silence. Elton's lawyer was the first to respond. A sharply worded cease and desist was drafted, threatening legal action if defamatory statements about his crew continued to circulate. The letter didn't go public, but the message was clear. Enough. Still, Elton remained silent. At least, publicly. Privately, he told friends. If you can't acknowledge damage done, you're not just careless. You're dangerous. But the damage was already done. Meghan's team had spun the story, cast doubt on the crew, and turned Elton's aviation legacy into a whispered punchline. And yet, they weren't done. Because in an attempt to prove their innocence, Meghan's office made a bold move. They offered to release photos from the flight. Interior shots. Staff interactions. Even a smiling image of Harry near the cockpit. On the surface, it looked like goodwill. In reality, it was a trap. Because one of those photos, one that never made it to the press, was far more damning than they realized. The jet cabin, shot mid-flight, angled just right. And in the background, a reflection, in the mirror, of the unregistered female passenger. No sunglasses, no disguise, just enough facial detail to identify her as someone very familiar to Hollywood insiders. And what she was doing on that jet would blow the lid off everything. But that photo wasn't meant to leak. And when Elton's team got hold of it, they didn't just demand answers. They started digging. Because this wasn't about crew blame anymore. It was about cover-up. And the next chapter reveals who the mystery woman was and why her presence on board triggered alarms that reached all the way to Washington. What do you say when your godfather, the man who protected your family's honor for decades, calls to say he's done with you? That's the question Prince Harry found himself grappling with the moment he answered the call from Elton John. And let's be clear, this wasn't a friendly check-in. This was the call. The kind of call that ends alliances. That slams doors. That draws a line in permanent ink. But before we get to the words exchanged between these two titans of grief and legacy, we need to go back just a few days prior to when Elton finally hit his breaking point. Because by this point, it wasn't just about an overheated jet engine, or a missing Bentley, or surveillance blackouts, or suspicious passengers. It was everything. It was how it all unfolded, and how they responded when it did. Or rather, how they didn't. Elton had waited. For an apology. For a call. For anything. But Meghan stayed silent. Harry too. And then came that leaked PR strategy memo. Shift blame to crew. Avoid mention of missing car. That wasn't just damage control. That was betrayal. So Elton did something he hadn't done in a very, very long time. He got angry. Not the kind of anger that screams. The kind that chills. The kind that ends things. He sat down, took a breath, and said, "Call Harry. I'm not writing this in a letter." His assistant made the connection. It rang twice. Then hello. Harry sounded tired. Hesitant. "Harry, it's me." A pause. Then Elton said, "We need to talk about what happened." There was silence. Elton didn't wait. He dove straight in. The jet. The overload. The damaged engine. The tampered logs. The missing Bentley. The leaked memo. He laid it all out like a prosecutor in closing arguments. "You know how long I've trusted you," he said. "You know what your mother meant to me. You know what I gave, publicly and privately, to help you. And you've treated that trust like a blank check." Harry finally spoke. Elton, I didn't know about the car. I didn't say you stole it. Elton shot back. But someone in your circle did. And they knew exactly how to cover it up. More silence. Elton, we've lost control of some of this, Harry said, his voice quieter now. People around us they make decisions. Sometimes we don't even know. Elton wasn't moved. Then maybe you need to change the people around you. Harry tried again. I'm sorry, but the apology was too late. Too late. Elton wasn't asking for regret. He was asking for accountability. Do you know what it means to take responsibility, Harry? He said. It means not letting your staff hide behind PR firms. It means not shifting blame to crew who bend over backwards for you. It means calling me before this had to happen. Harry tried to speak, but Elton cut him off. You used to be the boy who called me on your birthday, who hugged me after Diana's service, who thanked me after every flight. Another pause. Elton's voice cracked. Now, you're a headline machine, a brand. And worse, you're becoming exactly what your mother hated. That hit hard. Harry was silent for what felt like hours. When he finally spoke, his voice was unsteady. Elton, I'm sorry. I don't want sorry, Elton replied. I want distance. And just like that, he ended the call. No goodbye, no talk soon. Just a breath, and then a click. It was over. And hours later, a letter was dispatched from Elton's legal team to the Sussex residence. It was short, professional, final, effective immediately. No further access to Elton's aircraft. No further logistical support. No participation in upcoming events, charities, or joint initiatives. All PR collaborations terminated. It was the social equivalent of being excommunicated from one of the most powerful celebrity circles in the world. The letter didn't make it into the press. But those in the know? They felt the shift. Invitations stopped arriving. Donors pulled back. Even a planned joint appearance at a mental health charity gala in New York was quietly canceled. The ripple effects were instant and devastating. And yet, there was still more to come. Because a day after the letter was delivered, a photo surfaced. A new one. A candid shot from inside the jet. Not from the Sussexes. Not from Elton. But from someone else on board Flight X. The mystery woman. The one who wasn't on the manifest. In the photo, she's seated near the back, holding a small silver laptop. Her face partially obscured, but not enough. Within minutes, she was identified by aviation security insiders as a well-known Hollywood fixer. Someone linked to political lobbying. Someone who had no reason to be on that flight. Someone whose presence was a legal and reputational liability. Elton's team was stunned. This wasn't just a passenger breach. This was a potential security violation. Because if someone unauthorized boarded that jet, if they had access to communications, tech equipment, or data mid-flight, if they used that aircraft for purposes beyond its stated flight plan, then the Sussexes hadn't just misused Elton's jet. They had compromised his entire legacy. At that point, Elton's silence turned to fury. He told a close confidant, I protected them like they were my own, and they treated my plane like an Uber. And the worst part? He still hadn't received a single message from Meghan, not even a text. And Harry? Gone quiet again. The boy who once leaned on Elton's shoulder at Diana's memorial now hid behind press releases and lawyers. And Elton? He was done, not out of anger, but out of grief. Because this wasn't just the end of a friendship. This was the final death of a promise he made at Diana's funeral. Look after the boys. He had tried. And now? One of them had chosen a path Diana never would have. But what Elton didn't realize at the time was that someone else had been watching all along. Someone close to Diana. Someone preparing to speak up. And when they did, it would shake what little foundation remained. Because the next voice to enter this story wasn't Elton's. It was someone even closer to the throne. A man like Elton John doesn't need to raise his voice. All he needs is a letter. And when that letter arrived at the Sussex residence, hand-delivered by a discreet courier wearing no insignia, no badge, and offering no words, it was like receiving a royal decree from a court far older and far colder than Buckingham Palace. It was the kind of letter that didn't need explanation. Because the silence was the message. Let's set the scene. 2 days had passed since Elton's phone call with Harry. 2 days of private phone lines going unanswered. 2 days of PR strategists crafting invisible walls around the Sussex brand. 2 days of Elton's inner circle finalizing what was, in many ways, a eulogy. And then it happened. At 7:04 a.m., a black Range Rover pulled up to the gates of the Montecito estate. A man in a slate-gray suit stepped out. He wasn't security. He wasn't media. He was a messenger. He handed the envelope to the front gate assistant. No words, just a nod. Inside the envelope, a single-page document printed on thick, eggshell white paper. Header, private and confidential, from the desk of Sir Elton John. It was written not in Elton's handwriting, but typed, clinical, clear, and deliberate. And it wasn't angry. It was surgical. The kind of letter that cuts clean through flesh and bone, with elegance. Let's break it down. The opening line, to the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. This letter is written with regret, but also with clarity. No warmth, no flourish. Just a statement of intent. Then came the body. After careful consideration, I am formally severing all logistical, professional, and personal affiliations between myself and your household. This includes, but is not limited to, air travel arrangements, event collaborations, and joint philanthropic initiatives. That line alone sent chills through the Sussex staff, because it didn't just end a relationship. It shut off the oxygen supply. You see, Elton wasn't just a friend. He was a gatekeeper. A key holder to A-list celebrity circles, to Hollywood elite, to British media corridors, and political influence behind the scenes. Without him, the Sussexes were cut off from a crucial support system, one that had quietly sustained them during some of their darkest press cycles. But it got colder. I have extended my support to you both out of deep loyalty to your late mother, Princess Diana. That loyalty has now been tested beyond repair. I no longer believe that association serves the integrity of her legacy. That line, it hit like a torpedo, because invoking Diana wasn't a casual move. It was a final blow. A reminder that the bridge Harry and Meghan had just burned wasn't only to Elton, it was to one of the last true guardians of Diana's memory. And then came the final paragraph. Please consider this my last formal correspondence. I do not require nor expect a reply. I wish you peace and protection. But I must now pursue both for myself. Signed, Sir Elton John. Underneath, a handwritten postscript. 3 words. No more favors. That was it. Short. Devastating. Final. Now, let's talk about reactions. According to an insider present at the Montecito estate that day, the atmosphere shifted the moment the envelope was opened. Harry read it first. He reportedly went pale, held the letter in both hands, reread it twice, and sat down in silence. He didn't speak for over 10 minutes. Just stared at the handwriting. The assistant who delivered it whispered to a colleague later. It was like watching someone realize they'd just lost their godfather again. And Meghan? She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She reportedly looked at the letter, handed it back, and said, "Well, that's disappointing." That was it. No visible regret. No acknowledgement of fault. Just a chill, almost clinical, detachment. One staffer later said, it was like she was filing it away as a PR inconvenience rather than a human loss. But inside the PR war room, panic was brewing. Because Elton's silence was louder than any tabloid scream. And if he did choose to go public? If he decided to so much as drop a hint of what happened, at a charity dinner, in an interview, even in passing, it would demolish the Sussex narrative of victimhood and sincerity. So their team went into overdrive. Damage control mode. They drafted internal memos, restructured appearances, even considered accelerating the announcement of a new charitable initiative to bury the story. One advisor even floated the idea of publicly praising Elton in a media interview, hoping to neutralize the optics. But Meghan rejected it. No need to grovel, she allegedly said. He made his choice. And Harry? According to insiders, he tried to write back. Not a long message, just a handwritten note. A simple appeal. I never meant to let things fall this far. I miss you. But the note was never sent. His team advised against it. Too emotional. Too reactive, they said. Instead, the letter went into a drawer. Still there, as far as anyone knows. Unread. Unsent. Just waiting. And what about Elton? How did he feel after the final letter? You'd think he'd be relieved. Free. But that's not what sources say. A longtime friend described him as heartbroken, but stoic. He didn't celebrate cutting them off. He mourned it. Because Elton doesn't discard people easily. He's forgiven betrayal before. He's extended olive branches to those who left him bruised. But this was different. Because this wasn't just personal. It was historical. It was emotional. It was Diana. And for Elton, to see her son walk down a path of manipulation, misused power, and unchecked damage. It was the final straw. So he closed the chapter. Not with vengeance, but with precision. And that letter? It became more than just a goodbye. It became a document of consequence. A turning point. The moment where celebrity loyalty ended and legacy preservation began. But here's the thing. Elton wasn't the only one writing letters. Because while the Sussexes scrambled behind the scenes, a very different kind of envelope was being prepared, from a very different kind of sender. And the contents of that letter would threaten to make this entire scandal explode onto the global stage. When things go wrong, most people try to fix it, but in Hollywood and royal